for example, who would replay over and over in his head, I wish I'd seen the warning signs. I wish I could have done something about this. I wish I'd had a weapon. I wish I could have fought back. I wish I could have protected my family members who were killed or persecuted. That pain of mine never goes away.
As a kid growing up in Tucson, Arizona, I was raised by my grandmother. Most of her friends were Holocaust survivors. And I learned at an early age that there was always something very wrong with the picture, if I can put it that way. You always saw stacks of bodies at the death camps, but none of those bodies were holding a gun. But next to the bodies, you might see a Nazi soldier holding a gun. So it became pretty obvious to me, and perhaps in my Arizona environment, that a lack of being able to defend one's life had an awful lot to do with making it possible for governments to kill you. I thought this was a story that had to be told. It's a story that most people do not understand. It's a history lesson that most people are not getting in school. And the best way to tell people in America is to make a visual presentation instead of expecting them to read a book. So we set out on telling people information that lots of folks would rather they not know. And among them are folks who are supporting gun control schemes. And we wanted people to understand the downside of gun control, the side of gun control you never hear about on the 6 o'clock news. And to bring all this information together over the years and be able to put it into a visual presentation was not only a fascinating experience, but I think we finally have put the right package together to help people see that how evil gun control is. No longer do they have to read a book now to see the foundation of a genocide, the steps that are taken. No longer do they have to read books, although I wish they would, but to grasp the big picture. It's all here now. It's within the film. I think this documentary has the potential to save lots of lives. And it may only be about an hour long, but it's an hour that can change the course of human civilization, in my opinion. Because the more people who understand how the game is played, if I can phrase it that way, the more people who understand how dictatorships come into power, I think, and the more people that we can convince to be armed, and then I think the more people we'll be able to save. And if we can save more human lives, then that means there'll be more people who will be able to control government. And never again will people fear their government. And that's a key to preventing future genocides. I'm hoping that people who decide to watch this film are those that are concerned about the preservation of life. People who realize that they are their own first line of self-defense, people who do not want to be victims by an oppressive government, people who are opposed to police states, dictatorships, tyrannies, people who really care about their families. I hope that people who already believe in gun ownership will watch this documentary so that they can tell others about the evils of gun control schemes. They can help others understand how horrors happen to people who are defenseless. Well, my goal for the people who see this film is to help them have the knowledge, the information of the history of gun control and how it has been so horrible and how it has brought about so many tyrannies and police states and dictatorships and, of course, genocide. And I think that people need to think about how horrible these situations have been. And I ask people to imagine a world that is free from genocide. And then imagine a world that because there is no gun control, there is no death by government. You know, producing this documentary had some high points and some low points. And one of the most disheartening areas was dealing with so-called humanitarian groups. They always go to the public and say, gee, we want to help save lives, send us money. And when we went to one of these large humanitarian groups, the United Nations, and asked to use some of their photographs of Rwanda and Uganda, they initially said yes, but then they realized that we were opposed to gun control, and they made it very clear they would not work with us because we believe in the preservation of firearms ownership. And so my message to people concerning humanitarian groups is that if you want to give them money, that's all well and good, but maybe you should just ask what their position is on firearms ownership, because most of them do support victim disarmament policies that make police states, dictatorships, and genocide possible. Well, I think there's a very clear message in this film for American military personnel, and it's a message that they unfortunately don't get in high school before they go into service. And I'm not so sure it's even a message they get while they're in the military. But one of the reasons American military personnel are put in harm's way by being sent to foreign lands is that the people in those lands fear their government because they can't control their government. Their government has gone bad. Their government may be killing them. And all of this came about largely because the people are defenseless, which means they don't have access to firearms. I think September 11th was a good example of the uselessness and the futility of gun control laws. When you think about how several hate-filled terrorists were able to take over airplanes using box cutters and pocket knives, and they got away with it. They were able to murder thousands of people because no one on these planes was able to defend their life. No one had a gun. And I think that this is a lesson that is not being learned in America or throughout the world. If you want to stop criminals, you have to speak to criminals in a language they understand. And if they want to be violent against you, then you have to use violence against them. And I think that governments do get scared. And it's dangerous for people because when governments get scared, they do scary things. And that's what we have seen time and time again throughout history. The communists were afraid of the people. The Nazis were afraid of the people. Every dictator, every police state, every tyranny fears the people. And so people should always be very fearful of government. There's a saying, that an armed society is a polite society. I grew up in an armed society in the Arizona desert, and it was very polite. And so there's a lot of truth to that expression. And I think that America would be a lower crime country, if I can put it that way, that the people in America would be safer if they were able to defend themselves.